I don't know if the rest of you have been reading some of the data that's been coming out about the impact of COVID-19 on women in the workforce. And it's chilling and it's potentially devastating and setting us back decades. So we had this conversation scheduled prior, Barbara, to some of this data coming out, and it makes it more relevant than ever. I'm thrilled to be have Barbara Bauer with us today. Barbara and I actually met through the Colorado Technology Association. And we could spend the entire time together, Barbara, just on your background. So I'm going to let you give us the highlights and to be having you this conversation about how we get more women on boards, how we get more women investing dollars so that we can sort of turn this tide. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Mo, and it's such an honor and a pleasure to join you and all your listeners and community today. It's interesting, the older you get, the longer it can take to talk about your background. So in the interest of giving us more time to really talk about what's relevant today, and I do have some important things I think I'd like to talk about relative to the data you mentioned. I'll be pretty brief about the background. For most of my professional career, I was an IT executive working on very large software applications for telecommunications companies. And I sort of retired from the big corporate technology scene and decided I wanted to do some work internationally. And I said I'd basically do any consulting gig as long as it involved international business or education. And so I started working with some consulting opportunities in Vietnam and began to focus on Southeast Asia because I didn't know very much about it and wanted to learn about it. And after a few years of doing sort of small consulting projects in Vietnam, Cambodia, I ended up doing a 4-year position in Myanmar, which was just then opening up their policies so that multinationals could come in and they were open to the world, so to speak. And in that position, I was doing an impact investing role as country director for a Norwegian organization, and we focused on women and young adults and their opportunities to start businesses. So about 4 years ago, I came back from Myanmar and immediately joined Rocky's Venture Club, which is the longest running angel network in the United States.
Really? I didn't realize that, Barbara.
Exactly. Started in the early 80s, and about 7 years ago, the current executive director, Peter Adams, took it over and really revitalized it, and most importantly, had a very deep commitment and very intentional about inclusion and diversity. And so when I came back from Myanmar, I joined RVC to help support what they were doing and also to see if we can increase the number of women investors. And I want to celebrate today because today is actually Global Entrepreneurship Women's Day. And I'll put in a plug later today at 3:00 Mountain Time. We are hosting an event featuring, we're calling it Reversing the Trend, Funding Female Founders. And the interesting thing, when I joined RVC 4 years ago, and to date, RVC's portfolio of companies that have received investment is balanced, about 50% men-led ventures and 50% women-led, a founder, a co-founder, a CEO.
Full stop, right there.
Yeah.
Right, that is extraordinary. And that, you talked about the commitment, but that demonstrates the commitment.
Yes. And I think the most interesting aspect of that, there are far more men investors in our network organization than there are women. Only about 16% of the 200 are women. So it is men who are driving the investment in those women-led ventures.
That's great. That's great, right? That and creating this ecosystem. And I think what's interesting, we're talking about sort of Colorado here. We're seeing so many secondary, what's happening sort of tech wise, the things that are happening in Colorado as a secondary location for many of the big, Silicon Valley based.
Right.
So I think it bodes well, I think, for investing, and hopefully we'll have this ripple effect coming out from Colorado. And we can take the model that's been happening at Rocky's Venture Club. And I
Yes.
think, right, because so let's dig into on some of that data, Barbara, that's coming out about women in the workforce. We've been impacted more. 21 in 4 women is considering leaving right now.
Right.
Mental health. We've got some folks on the Moxie team who are juggling being, work and kids and school and, everybody in the house. And, it's really, really hard. It's hard.
Yeah. And we frequently think about um, women who are employed at the lower end of the sort of salary scale, but this is affecting women all the way up and down that pyramid. And I don't have any words of wisdom on this, except that we really need, if we're in an organization that employs women, we really do need to take a look at how creative we can be in ways that enable those employees, men too, because there are certainly lots of situations where men are caregivers as well, to enable flexibility and understanding and patience.
So it's funny, Barbara, we'll have to have an offline conversation. On my walk this morning, I started creating some interesting opportunities to fix for solutions. So it's my like, okay, we have this problem, it needs to be fixed. If we connect this, and this, and there's some data. And so I actually I'm hopeful, I know I'm one of probably thousands of people where ideas are sparking. So hopefully some really great innovation comes out of this. And in the meantime, the impact is real.
Yes, it is real. And Mo, I was just talking to a colleague yesterday who reminded me that one of the things that impacts women who are perhaps not at that lowest tier of salary, but seniority is frequently a consideration when you are thinking about downsizing your organization. And that has a bigger impact on women employees because they are currently, broadly across the employment data, less senior in many cases than men.
The other piece, I'll have to find this HBR piece and the research around it. It will also, if we're just looking at tenure, companies can wipe out years worth of diversity in one layoff.
Right.
If you're only looking, if they're going the easy route and just looking at tenure, not only are you going to impact women, you're going to impact across the diversity spectrum. So if you have to do those downsizing, you need to be really thoughtful about what are people actually contributing to the organization, what's their track record, what have they delivered, not just how long have they been in the seat, because you will put your organization back. You'll wipe out all the progress that you've made.
And diversity is on, I think, every corporation's, every business's mind. And so I'm hoping when their planners or executives think about that, they include both commitment to the company, as might be manifested through tenure, performance on the job, as well as the absolute critical need to ensure that these sorts of mass furloughs, et cetera, do not reduce their diversity profile because it will impact their financial results.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think I wanted to anchor us in this data because if we have more women-led invested businesses, if we have more women on boards, I think some of these things will naturally be a part of the conversation. Barbara, would you ground us in some of the data around how much women get funded now? How, and in particular, I want to break that out by not just women, but women of color, right? We know that there's even a disparity there. And then how many women right now are serving on boards? And again, I'm guessing that you have some of this, you can rattle off some of this.
I may have some data, but I certainly have at least the ability to state what the realities are. If we look at women founders, entrepreneurs, there's a very well-known but somewhat misunderstood data item that basically says, maybe 2% of women get funding from venture capitalists. And the venture capital level of funding applies to a set of ventures which have certain characteristics. It doesn't include all businesses. And so while that's a very important and meaningful statistic, and one that we are working hard at Rocky's Venture Club to change, we need to look at all of the businesses that women want to start, many of which are what we would call good, solid business opportunities, but perhaps not ones that are appealing to an angel investor or a venture capitalist. And women are now, I don't have the exact data, but women now are starting more businesses than men.
Yeah.
And around the world, if we could really support and provide access to capital to women, we could get another $1 trillion in the United States and another 4 or so globally in GDP, just by supporting that opportunity for women starting businesses.
Wow, those numbers are staggering.
And I think one of the really important things to remember, when you get women at the leadership level in either their own businesses or in mid to large corporations, the financial results of those businesses improve. And rarely in a situation like that are the financial processes and statements of a company ever questioned. Women tend to create a climate of financial responsibility inside organizations and companies do better when they have women.
I think it's really interesting. And when I'm asked now about the business case, I have gotten to the point where I'm like, give me the business case for all men and give me the business case for all white men, because what the research actually tells us is if you have that, you are in the lowest quartile. So defend for me remaining that way when it harms your business.
Yes, there's this easy to remember, but and kind of a music anecdote that there are more CEOs whose name is John than there are CEOs who are women.
Right, and you could add, and then again, women of color, women with disabilities. Oh, yeah. I think we have one LGBTQ, the Land O'Lakes CEO. I mean, it's right. So I always like to talk about intersectionality in this too, because I mean, we know not just if we're looking at gender, but if we're looking, if we have Black women, if we have LGBTQ, if we have women with disabilities, all of those things, we know those make stronger businesses. So yes. How do we get there? How do we get there? How do we get more women on boards? How do we get more investing dollars into these, maybe not VC level companies, although we're hard on that too, but across the board, how do we shift this?
Well, I think one of the instances of progress this year is that we are much more aware of the benefits that come from diversity. And so it is top of mind for every board, every corporation, every business. Awareness is insufficient, as we know. And so intentionality and then actions that really implement that intentionality.
Right. We hope is not a strategy.
No,
Intentions, great.
yeah.
Show me money.
And as I was preparing for the event we're going to host later this afternoon with a panel, I was thinking about how has RBC achieved this balanced portfolio with mostly men, only 16% women investors. And over the last several years, I've thought about this hard. And I think there are three elements, and they're probably elements that can be leveraged broadly. The first does start with intentionality, and the executive level has to exhibit that and be accountable to it. So they have to start measuring some way.
Yep.
I think the second one is women everywhere, I think, seek to be fully prepared when they undertake some new opportunity, position, business, whatever. And at RBC, we offer an education track that women and men, both investors and entrepreneurs, can take these courses, and those courses help prepare an entrepreneur to be very successful at pitching for funding. And women who come through that are credible, confident, they know their stuff, they can answer the questions. And so when they are presenting in front of an investor group that's probably 80 to 90% men, it's no big deal. It's just an audience of investors.
Mm-hmm.
If you have education or preparation without that initial intentionality and accountability, you may have education classes that are petri dishes for unintentional bias.
Yep. Yep.
So get that intentionality and accountability first, then deploy whatever the preparation track is or the information track is. And then the third element, there are lots and lots of individual advocates. And for example, in Rocky's Venture Club, we have some men who actively invest in women-led companies, seek them out, support them, help them. And when they are in the room, even if there's one of them in a room with 20 other much less aware and sophisticated men, their respect and credibility just eliminates most of the bias that might surface in a room that didn't have one of those sort of key advocates.
What's interesting about that? I'd never thought about, we talk a lot about allyship,
Yes.
And sponsorship. I'd never thought about that as it relates to who's sitting in, if you've got that ally, that person that's bringing that energy, that's saying, I get it, why investing in women, and I actively, how that
Yes.
can bring other investors along. Really
Yes.
interesting, really interesting point.
And I see it because I said in our investor meetings, and I'm also in other situations where we have large groups of people who are investors listening to pitches, and I hear their questions, and it's just become so visible to me that when we have Doug or Praful or Andrew or Peter and Dave in the room, I don't hear the biased questions that you would normally hear or that you frequently hear.
Yep.
And there's lots of research that shows women get asked questions that create an impression of risk. Men get asked questions that create an impression of potential.
Yes.
And so
I wonder if there's even an investor education, right? We talk about preparing women to go in and pitch, investor education about those questions. Are you asking the same set of questions? Are you, just like we do in an interview process to remove bias?
Exactly. Whenever we do what we call pitch academies, which are opportunities for founders to learn how to pitch successfully and how to prepare their business so that they're pitching something attractive. And we have these pitch academies prior to our conferences, any of our events, and we support the entrepreneurs. And at every one of those pitch academies, we talk about, you are likely, if you are a woman founder, to get this question. You may get a similar question if you're a man, but more frequently if you are a woman pitching. And here's how you need to handle that. And if you, as an investor or a pitch coach, are in the audience, you can help support that entrepreneur with a question that really follows up one of those risk inducing questions with a, what if you had another $200,000? Could you scale even more rapidly?
Yep. So the growth question, that
Right.
to that, the ally, the investor ally in the,
Yes.
as a part of the, so intentionality
And accountability, intention, accountability,
yep, accountability,
preparation.
yeah, love it. Okay.
And then as our community has become very familiar with successful women founders, I think that need to have an individual in the audience who is credible, reliable, etc., becomes reduced because everyone is now investing roughly in a balanced way. But to get started, I think it's important.
Well, and I think, layering on to that sort of ally investor is also the how, if we could get investors that also have the understanding, okay, if you're a woman of color,
Right.
here are right. So how can you be an ally and really uncover bias that could be a part of your decision-making process in investing as well?
Yes, and with respect to founders of color, we were able to support a Founders of Color showcase last May that brought in founders of color from across the country to pitch to investors. And one of the things which was so clear as we try and encourage founders of color, many of these entrepreneurs don't have access to the friends and family
Yep.
who can help them between their sort of idea stage and when they're really ready for an angel investment. They don't have the money to get enough traction to be attractive. And so we're now looking at ways in which that initial 50K, 25K, pay off my credit card bills
Yep.
situation for founders of color can be addressed. And there are some funds and initiatives in Colorado now that are really looking at that tier for founders of color, help them get from idea to being really attractive ventures.
Yeah. Because that is, having walked that path myself, right? That is a rocky, hard,
Yeah.
lonely, difficult path. And that's coming from somebody with all of the privilege around
Yeah.
being white, right?
Yeah, it's your credit cards, it's a second mortgage on your house, it's
Yep.
your
all those things, Barbara.
Yeah.
all those things.
Exactly. And so,
Yeah.
and we did that Founders of Color showcase for a national sort of opportunity. But I really think in Colorado, we have organizations that I think can partner together. We should do that here.
Yeah.
For Colorado founders.
So we just have a few minutes left. I want to shift if we can. And by the way, I got a text this morning that I thought was so appropriate from somebody saying, whatever you think you can't do, just know there's someone who's confidently doing it wrong right now. They have no plans at doing it better either, and people are paying to do it. Please believe in your own excellence as much as they believe in their mediocrity. And I think that's so good for women founders to and I told her, I was like, oh wow, that I needed to hear that this morning. Yeah. I think that should be a part of the prep as well. So let's talk about women on boards.
Yeah. Well, Colorado has made progress over the last few years. And so we've gone from very low numbers to now about 17% of the total available board seats for companies headquartered in Colorado. Fortune 500 companies are publicly traded companies, not just Fortune 500, are held by women now. And so that's been a significant amount of progress, but we are still below the national average. And
which is abysmal.
I take pride in Colorado because there's so many things I think we are best at. We certainly have the best weather on the planet.
Yeah, which,
and yeah, is right. And so many other ways in which we have made such progress in the way we operate, do business, and live. But this is one area that needs significant attention. And so starting Monday, I'm actually on a new job. I'm going to be the executive director for the board bound by the Women's Leadership Foundation programs. I've been on their board, and the organization has been active over the last 4 years in helping women learn about how to be successful board candidates, how to network and find a board position. And the organization is now at the point where it's financially successful, to the point where we can have an executive director. And so that's me starting Monday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And we have both the corporate board bound program and a program called community board bound, because no one gets to the point where they are attractive to a corporate board until they've had other board experience. And that usually starts with a nonprofit, a board, a commission. And so we want to get women in the door thinking about how to make progress, and then have these programs that really help them find corporate positions.
And I think we're also in an environment again where, as board seats come up, there's an understanding now of who are you bringing on that looks different than who is in this chair now, because again, the financial results around having women, having people of color on your board makes a difference.
And we frequently hear this rather ridiculous statement from people who are searching for board candidates: we just can't find any qualified women, any qualified Black women, which is
the hand.
utter nonsense. And as part of the organization, we do have a program called Board Connect, and we are reaching out to companies that have board seats, and they're now finding us. And many of them are coming back with, we want to find a woman of color. Our board is all what I would affectionately call pale, male, and stale.
That's right. It is.
And so and one of the interesting things that the research shows, if you are presenting a slate of candidates for a board position and you only have one woman or one person of color, they are unlikely to get that opportunity.
Yeah, statistically,
if
0%.
You have at least 2 or 3, one of them is likely to get that opportunity.
And that's the same. I mean, that goes all the way through hiring, right?
Yeah.
So it's that diverse slate is so critical. And I love that there's now a pipeline between, women that are ready, people of color that are ready, and folks that are looking for boards, because really the research has told us that so much of it is because of the referral. And if, like me bias and affinity bias, and here are the people that I know and that I went to school with and that were in my fraternity, and, all the things will just keep perpetuating.
That's right.
So sort of breaking into those at the system level is how we change this. And I love the programs that are in place now to connect need and talent.
And Mo, I want to go back to the text that you shared with us, because I'm an advocate for getting women on boards, and I'm probably someone who thinks that legislating policy might actually be helpful. California has done that. And And yet I think in Colorado, perhaps we're not quite at the point where either the public sector or the private sector is ready for that. But I look at this like we've got boards all over the country that have mediocre participants.
Yes.
I'm not at all worried about getting an unqualified woman on the board. It happens all the time with our male colleagues.
Barbara, I've said this, we will know that we've reached equity and equality when mediocre, unqualified women and people of color are being promoted.
Yeah.
Right, or getting board seats. That's the day that I'll be like, we're there, we made it.
Yeah, and I mean, that just is not at all frightening to me. You know, we have lots of mechanisms for dealing with low performers. What we really need are accepting mechanisms for just making the change.
Excellent. Oh my gosh, we have covered so much. How can folks, if they want to attend the event today, it's at 3:00 Mountain, 5:00 Eastern.
Yes.
Is there a registration link?
If you go to the Rockies Venture Club website, rockiesventureclub.org, there's an events link that you click to, and this will show up. It's called Reversing the Trend, Funding Female Founders. And you can just register through that website.
Great, great. What I'll do is I'll quickly put the link out.
Great.
So that folks can attend. I know that
Yeah.
I'll jump on. I think I can make it. So,
Great.
oh, Barbara, so much good stuff. Leave us with one last truth bomb around getting women more funding and getting more women on boards.
I think it is both about an individual and collective initiative. And so every day be intentional and accountable in your own personal choices and personal sphere of influence. And in every single organization you're in, be an advocate in that organization, a loud, opinionated, nagging, successful advocate.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Love that. Barbara, thank you so much, and really looking forward to the event this afternoon.
All right. Thank you so much, Mo.
Yeah, and see, we're actually doing a special session tomorrow. It's Transgender Awareness Week, and we are going to be talking about transgender inclusion tomorrow on Everyday Inclusion and Belonging. And happy Women's Entrepreneurship Day. I know that's not the exact title, but all of you women out there leading your own businesses, I see you. You're amazing. Keep it up. Thanks, everybody, and be inclusive.